And like we said before, like just opening up our home is not an easy thing. So to kind of see the end result and see that it was worth it definitely made us all feel better about it. And I think the documentary is definitely gonna allow us to have some conversations and open up a lot of, I guess, communication about what we want our league to be moving forward. So I think it's gonna be a beautiful thing. Yeah, I'm back.
How does it feel to know that you're gonna be with that team for another 2 years?
It feels amazing. It feels amazing. Like I was telling them, that trial period is over. Like, and we saw what we can do in New York, and just what New York basketball means to all the fans there, and what it would mean to bring a championship to New York. And so we started something special, and I just wanted to continue to help build that, grow that, and ultimately get to that final goal. So I have a little bit of time, maybe a few more days. I actually have to go to Maryland and DC for my high school Hall of Fame induction and my college Hall of Fame induction. And then after that, I'm heading back to China.
I mean, that sounds like it's a pretty sweet deal.
It is.
Way to start off the year and Black History Month.
Exactly, Black History Month is here. So yep, all good stuff in Black History Month.
Well, enjoy the events tonight, JJ. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
That, of course, was Jonquel Jones talking to us about coming back to the New York Liberty. That's right. That was me reporting live from Toronto, which is where I caught this head cold. We'll get into Jonquel's news and more on this episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans.
Gotta get up, gotta get up. Hey, women's basketball fans, welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala.
All right. Hey, what do you say, basketball fans? Listen, Misha, it has been wild in free agency, and we're definitely going to get into that. We also had a buzzer beater, the one and only 2023 MVP coming up big for USA Hockey. We're going to get into that. But I wanted to start with the news. We had the clip opening up. We talked about this on our last live stream because Christina Williams reported on this. I also talked to you about the Shattered Glass screener that I was able to see. Shattered Glass is now out, so people can watch that. But JJ had always been leaning toward coming back to the New York Liberty. But now that it's official, Misha, what do you like? What do you think were some of the conversations that went into officially? Well, I should say it's not officially because JJ confirmed with me, but we haven't heard anything from the team yet. So actually, instead of that last piece, why don't you weigh in on why maybe it's not officially official yet?
Just because things take time. And I feel like the knee-jerk reaction, not just with JJ, but with a lot of news, that we see on the TL or we see on the transaction page, is to, blow it out of proportion. Y'all, she coming back. Everything's okay. Everything's good. Everything's fine. But as far as, the conversations that I think were had, I think, Mr. Cole, just letting her know we value you. We might not have cored you like, everybody else, but we value you and we need you here to build the thing that we're trying to build. Love this move for JJ. Because she just got to New York and has been there for a season, I felt really uneasy about even the thought of her going somewhere else because you need time to build roots. And I just think this is a great situation for her. So happy for JJ.
I agree. I think this is a good move. It's not an unexpected move. So I like it. Hey, Ronnie, what's going on? Misha, we in the house. Erica in the house. Brian will be joining us a little bit later and hopefully bring some insight from Brooklyn and the USAB camp, which we're going to talk about later on the show. But Ronnie, right now, we just cutting it up about this JJ news. I agree with you. I think it's about things taking time. We also know that Breanna Stewart, again, one of the first things we knew from exit interviews was that Jonathan Kolb, to your, the homeboy you mentioned earlier, he wanted to core Stewie, and she has been cored, but that paperwork also ink not dry, not official there. But I wonder if that had to do anything with Misha, some of the goings on in the WNBA, including immediately following the Shattered Glass premiere. hosted by the WNBPA, Nneka Ogwumike, spending some time with the New York Liberty. And we ultimately know she signed elsewhere, but was that ever a reality, do you think, to get Nneka Ogwumike on a team that has Cord Stewie, was bringing back JJ, and effectively has its starting five locked down at least through next year?
Nah. Nah. That's just too much, y'all. It's just too much. There's such thing as, I don't know, too many big names on a team. Like, and not even just the names. Like, again, we saw this season what a struggle it was for New York to mesh JJ and Stewie and Sluty and Sab. We want to add another all-star, another, somebody who needs touches. Like, as a coach, you're thinking, what percentage of touches can we get to Stewie? Can we get, it would have been way too much firepower, too much ammo, right? So I don't think that was ever really going to happen, but I was glad to see her there. It looked like she had a good time. So
yeah, I think to your point, it's not a situation where any of them right now, at least, is a la Tina Charles or Candace Parker, who we will also talk about in this free agency segment, where they're looking to maybe do less, which is
I mean, right now, yeah,
Tina's been trying to do less for years since she left the Liberty, and every time she's had a stop, she's had to do more than she expected to do. Now, people want to hate on Tina, and listen, I got my own stories on Tina Charles, but I'll tell you this, she's been honest and upfront about that from jump. So, and then she goes to Washington with no EDD, which we'll talk about. Then she goes, listen, I'm sorry, fam. Then she goes to Phoenix, and I mean, woo, you want to talk about sipping tea, which Auntie is literally sipping tea to try and get this voice back. But Skylar Diggins-Smith starting to drop all kinds of little nuggets, and Tina Charles is putting out popcorn emojis out here. So that's a cool situation, and people tried to vilify her for leaving what seems like a really messy situation. It seemed like a messy situation then. And then, of course, there was Seattle, who likely doesn't make that final playoff push without Tina Charles. And if you don't want to believe me, Sue Bird said it straight up. So, I think that's interesting, but I always think it's interesting how people vilify Tina Charles in specific ways, because she's something, she's a little extra, but y'all be coming, I don't know, I think in the wrong places. But that being said, I think when we saw the news, Misha, what I was saying is, again, who sits the bench? What I do think, though, and this is something that we'll talk about, because we're not going to do a specific player season in review just because there's so much news. But when we start getting into Steph Dolson, even Jocelyn Willoughby, we know that the New York Liberty want to have a stronger bench. And one way to do that is to get someone who is an unquestionable starter come off the bench for you. I just don't think that this mix of players was the right one. If anything, it's Sloot going to come off the bench, Sloot or Sab. But Nneka is not a like for either one of those players. So that, I'm with you. It was unlikely, but we also know how things work, right? Sometimes you have a conversation in this year and you don't go, but in years to come, we might, see that happen. Because I do think Nneka has, she knows, and she said it in the doc, that there are fewer years ahead than there are that she has behind her, which is fine. But I mean, are we talking like 3 years? Are we talking 5 years? Are we talking 1 year? I think it's going to be interesting. But let's stay with Seattle, because speaking of Skylar, I mean, they get Skylar Diggins-Smith.
I think, and I tweeted it when I saw the news immediately, automatic contender. Gotta be. This season, I'm staying in the offseason, I'm staying completely away from the word super team. I'm no longer using it, because not just because we saw how the players reacted to it, but because I think it's getting conflated with so many different, like, everybody has a different definition. And for me, I'm using contender because that means you could make a deep run in the playoffs. That doesn't mean you're the automatic champ. That doesn't mean you're automatically in there with the aces in the finals. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm counting them. I'm keeping my eye on them as a squad that could make a one of those deep playoff pushes, right? But immediate contender. I think this is a great landing spot for Skylar Diggins-Smith. Come on, Notre Dame connection. Like, be serious right now, y'all. This is major. And Nneka is the type of player who I think only adds beautifully to that picture, because you also got to consider Ezi Magbagor's on this squad. And when I think about her game and I think about the way she can evolve as a player, and then also think about the ways Nneka can evolve as a player, I mean, that to me is only going to be mutually beneficial for the two of them. And then you add that to the rest of that roster, they're an automatic contender. I love this move for all parties involved.
I agree with you. Right before the draft, I was trying to work on a piece to talk to the teams, that were in the lotto. And the first team that was very transparent was the Seattle Storm. We had a great conversation. That story just never came to pass. I can tell you what, Phoenix, who we're going to talk about, yeah, they didn't want to answer no questions, which was very interesting. But yeah, Phoenix, I don't know what you got going on there, but you in danger, girl. But I like this move for Nneka. She's staying on the West Coast. I think honestly that's also good for the league, to have someone like that go to a team that, again, as I said, I was reporting on a story that just never came out, but what Seattle has been saying is that they weren't using the term rebuild. They wanted to be aggressive in upholding the standard, is what the team kept saying, upholding the standard that had been set. And I think this is a really great way to do that. And again, shout out to Christina Williams. We were at the player marketing agreement kind of media day, and she asked Jewel Lloyd about a Notre Dame reunion, and lo and behold, there you go. All right, since I mentioned Phoenix, now they made a splash that I certainly wasn't expecting. What did you make of them picking up another guard in free agency? Or actually, I guess via trade.
They just got too much of the same on that roster right now. And that's not to say every individual guard is the exact same kind of player, no. But I don't think there's enough diversification of skill set. I think you've got a lot of people who want to shoot the ball. You got a lot of people who want to have the ball in their hands when it matters. And that's just, unless you can get everybody on the same page about who is where on the hierarchy, which I don't think is going to be very easy to do, considering, as we know, Sophie Cunningham and Kalia Copper do not get along for all intents and purposes that I have seen, right? What I have seen from afar. Okay, I'm not there with them. I haven't asked Ka or Sophie personally what they think of each other, but come on, y'all. Come on. So that added to the whole DT. Is she at the end of her rope? Is she more of a hindrance than, a benefit to that team? Like, there's just too much extracurricular happening, and I don't know how you mesh all that on the court.
With a coach that has never coached women's basketball before.
Plus that. I mean, you asked Sandy Brondello, everything's coming back to the Mercury on this episode. You asked Sandy Brondello to do what she did last season with all her years of experience and playing experience in the WNBA.
Right.
Dude is
is this another Derek? Is this another Vanessa? Like, you hate to see it. And this, you know what, is Women's Black History Month as far as I'm concerned. And y'all paid this man the most. I mean, on the one hand, given what you're talking about, yeah, you might need to get paid pretty well to take this job.
To make sure he don't leave.
Listen, we about to throw the gauntlet. So yeah, why don't you just hold that stack right quick?
Yeah. But the other thing, Erica, and this has less to do with the X's and O's of it all, but and I don't want folks listening to this to take this the wrong way, but I'm worried about BG and all this. Because it's just too much. Like, she came back to play basketball, and now you're on the team with easily the most drama, the most to figure out, the most in the running for the most, because we ain't talking about the Mystics yet. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a lot going on, and I just kind of hope that, I don't know, she is not, I don't know. I want her to be able to find that home again in Phoenix and have that be a safe, kind of experience for her. And I think all this volatility just does not help the equation. So I wonder, does she, rock with it or,
Yeah, that's tough. I saw Brian in the green room giving the timeout on what he was just saying. But Brian Florentin, everybody, joining us here from, I think, You're in Brooklyn, right? I'm trying to recognize the backdrop. All right, cool. Tight. Yeah, but we talked about JJ confirming with me that she's returning. I know Stewie had some funny little anecdote about that. Jackie tried to get the tea, and Stewie was like, is it official? That was hilarious. But yeah, okay, so we moved on though, Brian, to Phoenix. So what Misha was just saying, they were saying that, I mean, you know, where does BG and just her return to the WNBA fit into what at least is teeing up to be drama again this season?
I will say, for BG's sake and for the folks in Phoenix, they won't have a head coach who the first thing they'll say is Happy Black History Month. So they're off to a great start there. Like, the new guy, he may have his problems, but that, as long as you don't do that, you are halfway there. So don't do that. Hello, Roddy. Nice to see you. But for Phoenix, they have so many moving parts. I don't know how it's going to fit. Like, Beck Allen's there now. I didn't expect Kalia to be traded over there. Just everything is happening so suddenly. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of here in New York, the Brooklyn Nets first year with their new head coach and all that talent, all those players coming together in a tight window with big championship expectations. And I think with Phoenix, now that they've boosted the roster after what's been a pretty down 2 years, and a lot of eyes are going to be on them with the All-Star game in Phoenix, the looming pick swap in 2025 with the Liberty. So there's extra pressure on them to be good in a hurry. So it's going to be a lot coming together for Phoenix. So I think especially once they sort of like lock in BG and make sure that they have everything fully put together when it comes to training camp, they're going to have to hit the road fast because the road is going to be really difficult. The competition out here and in 2022. So it's going to have to be a quick learning experience for that group in a hurry.
Yeah, I think it's going to be wild. Real quick, some former New York Liberty players. We have Bria Hartley signs to a training camp contract, with the Las Vegas Aces. Kia Stokes set to return. And then there's Tina Charles, who is going to reunite with her former guard, Tanisha Wright, in the ATL. Misha, let's come to you first on this.
So I think, as far as her not wanting to do more, that's kind of up in the air for me right now. That depends on how certain players have developed in the offseason. Namely, I'm thinking about, Nas. I'm thinking about, I don't know. It just kind of depends. But as far as leadership goes, I think that's a great move. I think Ryan Howard, I think all these younger players who, Alicia Gray, who have the talent, we've seen what they can do on a great night. It's just the inconsistency. It's the dealing with adversity. It's the, in the WNBA, you can't just take nights off. And I don't think that they tend to take nights off, but I think as a group, sometimes there were moments I'm watching, like, they don't all seem to be on the same page. And I think that's where somebody like Tina Charles can step in and help. I do think she's going to have to do a little bit of work. But again, we're talking about her in the same vein as Candace Parker. Candace was out this season. You know what I mean? At the beginning of last season, she was a part of what the Aces were doing. And so I don't think this is a team that Tina Charles is going to have to carry. And in that vein, I think this is a good fit for her and what she wanted.
I can feel a lot of what you're saying there. I also think the piece about I was kind of reading between the lines here, but also the maturity, especially considering how they played against New York. And there's kind of a budding rivalry there. You bring in Tina Charles, that got a chip on her dang shoulder against that New York squad. I don't know, man.
She got all the chips.
Yeah.
She got a bag of chips.
She's not a bag of chips. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel for Atlanta. I'm really sort of excited to see what they do between getting Tina off the bench. Because I feel like Misha was saying, there were so many times I watched Atlanta. I'm like, guys, what are y'all like? What? Like, y'all should be better than this. Like, why y'all moving so slow on offense? Like, Cheyenne Parker's on the bench and no one knows why. And we asked Tanisha about it. She's like, I just did it. I'm like, what? No, what does that mean? Like, help me understand. So I feel like having a good vet like Tina and someone who I think really is eager to sort of get back on the good foot after her run with Seattle ended poorly in that series against Las Vegas. So there's going to be extra motivation for her to really get back on that deep playoff stage and see if she can make an impact in that way. And I will say, like, in Canada there is going to be really exciting. Like I was so surprised when I saw that that the Sparks cored her, then she was gone. I'm like, oh wow, like that's a huge, and she really made that big leap in such a fantastic way. And then you plug her in with a player like Ryan Howard, who's getting better and better by the day, and she's someone who's going to carry the franchise into its next iteration. Having that sort of like extra support for her makes things a lot better, and I think it takes a little bit off her shoulders as well too. So that way you have someone who can initiate the offense, run things, and when she sits down, you have Alicia Gray there, you have Shine Parker, you have JC, you have TC off the bench. There's a lot of good talent there. Now it's just a matter of can they as a group take that next step together, and where does it take them in 2024?
Yeah, for sure. Before we move on to the first quarter here, where we're going to talk about camp in Brooklyn, let's talk about, and Brian, you kind of alluded to it, so I'll stick with you. But outside of, so we mentioned Tino, we mentioned Skylar, we mentioned Nneka, we mentioned obviously the return of JJ, I think that there have been so many moves. You also mentioned Beck Allen, but are there any other moves that you found really interesting that we haven't yet talked about when it comes to the offseason? And then Misha will go over to you.
I think I'll stay in New York. Like the Liberty, besides JJ, did a lot of sort of like fortifying the second unit. They brought in Jokic, who played with Seattle last year before she left to go to Eurobasket. They acquired Leo Fajbic, a player whose rights were with the Chicago Sky. And I think for that group in particular, it's gonna. I think because Erica, we've talked about it a lot, where the Liberty didn't really hear, and it wind up sort of like biting them in the butt deep in the playoffs. So now you have talent that you're going to need to integrate. And I think that's going to be a sort of point we sort of like hammer into in training camp, where it's like, okay, it's not the bench last year. You have a little bit more positional versatility. You have these tools and these players who can help, and they're really young as well. And there's so many positives here. How can you, as a coaching staff, sort of integrate them, make them a part of the rotation while giving your top players a little bit more rest in between the seasons, so that way they're not playing 36, 37 minutes a night, having to play really heavy, intense minutes, so that way they can be fresh for post-Olympic break and a playoff run.
We're going to get to Misha in a minute, but I just want to ask you a straight up question, because I know it's something immediately after exit interviews that I was wondering, Brian, but does Steph Dolson have a spot on the 2024 New York Liberty?
I've been trying to figure that out for a couple weeks now, because I know when the Nneka thing happening, I was like, oh, somebody's getting boxed out here, and you are the person that looks like the odd person out. And I want to double check on her salary just to make sure, because I thought she was making close to like max numbers, but she was only making around 160 over the 2 years in New York. So as the Liberty try to sort of figure out what to do with the rest of the roster, I think there still is a spot for her on this team if they can make the math work. Because I think one of these sort of hidden, we talked about it over the summer when it happened. Like when Steph went out, the bench productivity went down a cliff in a heartbeat. Like it took like half a second, and then that bench just like sort of struggled in a big way. And I think having a player like Steph and what she brings is so valuable for this team. And I think having someone who can also give those minutes to JJ so she can sit down, have less minutes of Stewie at center. You can still take your time with Niara as she develops. I think having a player like that would be beneficial. So I hope that there's an avenue for her to come back if at all possible.
Misha, I'm going to come to you. Also, I'm putting in the chat the salary cap allocation per her hoop stats. But Misha, I saw you react. And again, this is one of them things that you got to talk about when you're looking to make tweaks.
Yeah. And I think, if the math works, then beautiful. And if, someone like Steph Dolson has been in the league and has been in so many different tiers of a roster. I think she's not the kind of player, obviously, that you have to worry about when her main minutes are coming off the bench. Like, she's not going to be an issue as an ego at all. If, you know, like you said, with Niara, if you want to give her more time to grow, then I think that's a beautiful way to do that. But I'm just like, I didn't see, and again, last season, she was struggling with some injury stuff too, like the whole rest of the New York roster basically was. But is it worth sticking with her, or is it worth trying to inject some new energy into the roster? And unfortunately, in my opinion, I think she's just, the time is kind of up. Like, what do you give when you come off the bench? Is it, okay, you're kind of keeping us afloat until JJ comes in, or what are you adding? You know, there's a difference between those two things. And with Steph Dolson, she kind of teeter-totters on either end of that line for me. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kept her on the roster, but I also wouldn't be surprised if she found herself, you know, floating.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think also someone who, I'll be honest, from the exit interviews, and again, we'll return to our player by player model. This is just a jam-packed episode, so we wanted to hit on some broad strokes things. But I think she sounded the most, to me, uncertain regarding what the future could look like for her with the New York Liberty. I think Jocelyn Willoughby sounded more confident. Now, is that just kind of their disposition? Is that because they had conversations? I think we caught the players, you know, not all of them had their proper exit interviews with the front office and with Sandy. So I don't know. It's just something to be explored for sure. I think Steph Dolson, Niara Sabali, and even Jocelyn Willoughby are among those players. And I think, yeah, if you say one of these things is not like the other, if you're investing in the future, then Steph is the odd person out. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But if you want more veteran experience and you think you can work with that, then maybe it's Steph and one of those young players. But yeah, but to Brian, to your point, her protected veteran salary per her hoop stats, and I put the link in the bio, but was $160K last year, and she's a UFA outright coming into 2024. But we cannot talk about free agency without talking about the Washington Mystics. And Misha, I'm just gonna let you rock on this one because I think you got two big things to talk about. We've talked about both of them here on this program. Did I actually think Tosh Cloud was going to leave? I don't know that I did. Now, EDD getting cored, and then as of today, reports that she's going to sit out the season. That seemed on par to me. But is there trouble in paradise?
First of all, who called it paradise over here? Y'all, ain't nobody said it was peaches and cream and roses and dandelions on this side, okay? You see, we ain't said all that. Last season was an up and down year, okay? It was an up and down year, even with EDD and Tosh and everybody. Where to begin? I mean, the Tosh thing, I genuinely wasn't surprised. I think I knew when the season ended, frankly, that she wouldn't be on the roster the next season, just because when players get on a roll like the one that she was on towards the latter half of that season and in the playoffs, you can't fault them for wanting to go somewhere where they can continue to blossom and grow individually and become the star that they're meant to be. Not that she wasn't able to be that in Washington, but I think as we saw EDD kind of come in and out, as we saw Shakira Austin kind of come in and out, as we saw that kind of inconsistency, it wasn't giving, all right, Eric and I'll add Mike Tebow in there, are giving the ball to Natasha Cloud and she's now our go-to. Like, that's not what happened, right? Because that hadn't been her role to that point. And so I think they figured it out by committee. But as you look back on that season, if I'm Tosh, I'm like, I need to go where I can explore this new scorer that I busted out in the 23 season. 33 points. She had never done, like, in years of watching her, I had never seen her play that well. And so I don't blame her for going to explore that. In terms of EDD, I'm also not surprised. I was actually just talking to my dad about this. I wouldn't be surprised if she hung him up soon, because as far as the body goes, as far as the tax and just strain that a WNBA season takes on your body, it's been obvious for years now, since before they even won a title, that she's really been struggling. And okay, of course, we love to applaud athletes for their resilience and their toughness and all that kind of stuff. But there is a real life, impact, a real life cost of fighting through injuries like the ones that Elena Deladon's had. We're not talking about sprained ankles. We're talking about herniated discs. We're talking about, like that's not two. Right. Get me right, Erica, two. And so I don't blame her for taking a year off to try to figure out not only what she wants to do, but what this organization wants to do. What does Mike Tebow and Eric Tebow have in mind? What are they trying to build? And moving into the rest of these kind of contract moves, they signed Carly Samuelson, okay, Julie Van Loo, who, if you watch that Belgium game today, you got a taste of what she can do, was really a pest in there, which is great. But do you want a pest or do you want a point guard? You know what I mean? Emily Angsler, we know the Mystics have we know the Mystics have a relationship with her. I really was impressed with her last year at Louisville and, last season in the minutes I saw her play. And then who else do we have? I'm missing one. Who am I missing? Let me see. Oh, and then Elisa Cunane. She signed a training camp contract. Okay, but it's kind of the same tier of player we're getting here. Nobody who's star caliber, nobody who can play in that post with Shakira. Yeah, me neither. Who can really help bolster their offense. That's been the issue. It's the offense. Like, we know y'all can play D, but who is your go-to? What's the strategy on that end? And right now, I don't really see one. I know that Ariel Atkins had a good year. Brittany Sykes had a good year. And Shakira had the year she could have with all her injuries. So it's just too much up in the air. And I think EDD sensed that. And she's like, look, I'm going to let y'all figure it out. Meanwhile, I'm going to go sell this wine and build this house stuff and whatever else she be doing. I'm not mad at her. I'm not even mad at her.
Yeah, I think the conversation is a little bit all over the place. People feeling that it's selfish of the Mystics to core a player who obviously was giving indication that they didn't want to be there and maybe wouldn't even play. It's selfish of Elena Deladon to get the core designation and then opt out. Some people saying then just retire. To me, the only reason that you would opt out of the core designation and not outright retire is maybe she does want to come back for one more ride, and either the terms or the location that Washington was offering is not what she wanted.
Yeah.
And so if she rides out this year, kind of forces the hand of Washington, do they want to do that again? And her say, oh, okay, I'm retired, so thank you. But I understand where Washington's coming from too. They're like, oh, you want to leave? Okay, that's cute. But yeah, we're gonna have to get something in return. I mean, it's Elena Deladon.
You gotta get something in return, because Shakira Austin, her trajectory right now, you have to capitalize on. Like, you absolutely have to capitalize on that. Now that she's back from the hip situation, you can't just have her come into a situation where her talent is just going to waste, because not only is that bad for her, that's bad for you. Like, just because, things are getting shaken up, the Mystics are building a rich history of stuff. That's facts. I'm very excited for Didi. Happy that, she's in the district. But yeah, that's my whole thing is Shakira right now is the shining star, and you need to build on that.
I'm with it. All right, Brian, we're going to kind of let you guide the ship here, because you were able to tap in a little bit as USA Basketball had their little mini camp in Brooklyn, so at Barclays Center. So first of all, just tell us about the camp, who was there, what were some of your takeaways from camp, and then Misha and Brian, I know both of y'all were keeping eyes on the Belgium USA game, so we're going to talk about that coming up next. But Brian, tell us what was going down in Brooklyn.
Well, I would say the first day, Erica, you've been in the practice facility, so you know how the building lays out. So pretty much the entire league was there. And by the time media opened at 11:30, a full game had been broken up between the two teams that Cheryl had put together. So so you envision like the baseline, like all the media, all the league personnel is like spread out across the baseline, and there aren't any seats, and we're like right next to the players as the game is happening. So Ryan Howard is inbounding the ball on one possession, and I'm sitting to her right as she's inbounding. I'm like, I'm kind of too close to the action right now. Like, oh, the ball's coming this way. Let me put my bag to the side so that way if the ball falls to me, I can just like get it back and play really fast and not delay the game any longer. So it was really jam-packed, and there was a great level of intensity among the players. You saw everyone starting to put their stuff together. You started seeing some of the rotations come together as far as like what Cheryl's thinking of, how the players want to sort of put things together. And I asked Stewie in one of the media availabilities about her ability to play various different positions, and she mentioned that's something that Cheryl was harping on with the group. She mentioned that, oh, Cheryl could be like, oh, one day you're gonna play a little bit of guard, you're gonna play center some of these days. Just be ready for everything. And that's one of the big things that sort of came into mind when it came to sort of like the camp and how everything was coming together. But I would say it was definitely great energy. You started seeing a lot of the sort of like continuity build up. You know, one thing, if you watch Liberty games, you know, Banaj Shalini is very vocal, very communicative. Even when I was walking into the area, I'm hearing someone say, ball. I'm like, that's Banaj's voice. She's on defense. Welcome. Good to see you again. So you sort of saw a lot of the things that we saw visually throughout the season come into play in that Team USA context. So that was very refreshing. And also, I think what helps really with the group is, I think Kelsey Plum was saying it, that a lot of the folks played together in Australia in the World Cup. So you really have that connectivity. So everyone is not the old sort of like on the men's side where, oh, we just coming together like 2 days ago, pick your 12, get out the country, go somewhere. It's hey, we've been working together for a few years. All of us are in camp. We're all together. We know what's what. We've played high stakes games together. So it's a lot. It was still building up continuity and building up that chemistry because it's been a while since they've all been together in that regard. But you really got to see a lot of it play out over the weekend, which I thought was really good. I thought, it was great seeing everyone there. We got a lot of great conversations with people like Aisha Wilson, Chelsea Gray. She's not cleared for 5-on-5 yet, but she was taking part in some activities. So it was good to see her out there and interacting with the teams. Sabrina was there with us. Pretty much everyone was there. So it was a really great atmosphere, I thought. And seeing all the coaching staffs come together, all the work that before they made the final 12 decision that afternoon was really sort of like, you really got to get a good feel for how USAB runs.
Yeah, for sure. Also, there were some celebrity sightings. I mean, Teaspoon in the house. This is like a vintage, what could have been photo now with Ka going to Phoenix, which is just wild to me because she seems so excited to work under Teaspoon and they seem to have a really good relationship. So, but we saw a little bit of that. I mean, Sue Bird was in the house, so it was really a star-studded event. I mean, that's what happens when you have things in New York. Everyone kind of pops in, pops through. Yeah, I think
not like that. DC was very much, this was like a decade ago at this point, but they had the camp and everything at American University when I was younger, and it was not giving star-studded. It was fun. Man, it was packed, but it won't pack with no stars. No.
That's funny. I want to stick with you, Misha, for a minute here because, I just lost my train of thought. This is what happens when you got a cold. Let me sip on this tea real quick and get my mind right.
Take your time, Auntie. Take your time.
Need
Y'all
tea.
send some healing vibrations to Auntie's voice and vocal cords. Okay,
appreciate y'all
out here like this.
But I'm here. You give 100% of whatever you got. So I wanted to show up for the fam here. But yeah, I think when you look at USAB, we talked about some players, including Banaj Hamilton, who will not be on this roster that we're about to talk about. But I think just an opportunity to kind of see different coaching styles come together as well was really interesting. But let's talk a little bit about now the roster. So you mentioned, Brian, that Asia Wilson was at camp, but she is not currently in Belgium. Misha, when you look at the roster comparing who is at camp versus who's in Belgium, again, how much weight should we put into this, knowing that the USA has already qualified for the Olympics and this is not a tournament that they quote unquote need to win?
I think, and this is an important conversation because I don't think a lot of people understand how that whole situation works. They're good. You know what I mean? Right now, they're just trying stuff. They're trying stuff. They're trying to figure out, you know, what pieces, in addition to the big pieces, the Asia Wilsons and the people who, in my opinion, have guaranteed spots on this team, who is going to fit in best with them, who is going to, you know, fill in those gaps. And so that's basically all they're trying to do. But of course, this is USA basketball we're talking about. So they also trying not to lose. And frankly, watching today's game, it was a struggle for me to kind of remember, okay, they are trying to
wait a minute.
to kind of remember and, you know, take that mental switch and be like, they're trying to figure out what supplemental pieces work the best. And so it was tough to watch them struggle through that game. Belgium has a really good team. They've had a really good team. Emma Meesseman, former Washington Mystic. Okay, look, there's just so much. But they had a great game. They had a, you know, full team effort and had USA on the ropes pretty much all of this game until the very end. Stewie's left-handed tip at the buzzer to win that for Team USA, 81-79. But
see, yeah, I had to on purpose.
You had the Stewie shirt on purpose.
Was ready. Was ready. Was ready.
It was game time for Stewie. But taking all that into account, I think there were a few players who stood out today. Namely, I think Fee for sure showed that amongst, you know, go-to players, she's a go-to player. And even though she might not be the flashiest on social media or the most popular or whatever the case may be, she's a dog. And she's going to be that no matter what the circumstances are. So I think that was a plus for them. I think KP, you know, she provided them a spark when nobody was giving anything. Like, it was giving nothing in the middle of that game. It was giving nothing. And KP, I thought Jackie, you know, they bring that defensive energy that we saw the Aces terrorize guards on the other end of the court all season with. And then Sab, we got to talk about Sabrina. We got to talk about her. Okay, not the leading scorer or nothing, but at the end of the game, who was putting up shots with confidence? Sabrina Ionescu. And did I agree with all of them? No. Did I love how far away all of them were? No. But to me, you know, watching that game, it didn't seem like something that the rest of her teammates were surprised by. It didn't seem like going back to the huddles, Cheryl Reeves in her face like, girl, why would you do that? Like, that's not what it was giving at all. So, you know, got my eyes on Sab, but there was some good stuff, even though it was a tighter game than most probably would have expected. You muted, Auntie.
Thank you. I'm excited to watch this one back. I was preparing the tease, so I didn't get to watch all of this, but was keeping up with the score. I'm excited to see in real time Sabrina Ionescu because y'all already know I keep saying when it comes to the New York Liberty, I still think the plan is to give her the keys. That being said, do I personally think that she has proven at this particular moment that is a foregone conclusion? I would say no. I think it's still highly likely. Do I think it's a foregone conclusion? No. So hearing what you're saying about this game, getting her confidence, getting her shot, I like that. And I remember what I was going to say before. I wanted to go back to, you mentioned KP, Kelsey Plum, but Kelsey Plum was asked about Caitlin Clark's record. And this kind of ties into what you were talking about effectively with efficiency. A lot of people have dinged KP with efficiency, Sab with efficiency, and definitely are doing so with Caitlin Clark. And I have a story I'm working on where I ask players, I mean, are you more of the shooter going shoot, or do you favor efficiency? Is it a little bit of both? I think the answers are very, very interesting, especially given what position each person played. But I wanted to bring up the fact that Kelsey Plum, once again, because there's this great piece by Katie Barnes. If you haven't read it, they did a great job writing about Kelsey Plum a few years ago and her struggles with mental health, including when she got the NCAA women's scoring record a few years ago as part of the Washington team. And she was asked about Caitlin Clark, who's about to pass. She's 66 points, away from passing Plum. She could, if she averages 29 points in her next 7 games, she could be the all-time scoring champion, including NCAA, passing Kelsey Plum, AIAW, which preceded the NCAA, and that is the one and only Lynette Woodard, who has that record, or even the NCAA men's record, which was set by a gentleman, I forget what school he went to, and his last name I'm blanking on right now, but he has the overall record at I think he's at 36-6, somewhere around there. So yeah, Caitlin Clark is really in a different stratosphere right now. But when you think about what Kelsey Plum said about that being a tough time for her and that she hopes Caitlin Clark has supports, Brian, I want to come to you first because, again, Sabrina Ionescu gets some of this. Now, whether it's warranted or not, I'm not getting into that conversation with y'all today. But the fact is that, I mean, some of this fodder that we see on social media, it definitely can impact how people are certainly perceived, but also how they're able to navigate through the perceptions versus the reality of their career. So Brian, when you heard that, when you heard KP kind of opening up about the darker side of these records, what were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, like, there's a funny moment during the availability this weekend. Like, as KP was talking, Diana Taurasi came up behind and was like, Caitlin Clark, and it really sort of like lightened the mood a little bit. So that was great. And I would say it's tough when all eyes are on you and you're still under 21 years old. It's hard for athletes who are in like their 30s dealing with all the pressure and attention on them. Imagine being a 21-year-old college kid trying to go through that. And you're carrying the university on your shoulders because you are the best player, you are the national player of the year, you are all these things, and you are projected to be one of the folks who sort of like revolutionize the pro game on that side of things. So it's a lot of like obvious pressure that's directly in front of you, and then you combine it with like these sort of like, I guess, just there's way more eyes and surveillance on people, generally speaking, through social media, all these sort of apparatuses that come up. So you don't really get a chance to sort of like get away from it. Like everywhere you look, it's, oh, you're always having to perform for a public, even in your private moments, because there's always somebody watching. Somebody's watching, someone's documenting your every move. There's always that extra pressure to be on your game and on the ball at all times. So it's a lot of big pressure in that way. Bless you. And for KP, I remember it's so hard. And even when she came into the league, there was that pressure of her being in the Aces/Silver Stars, having to carry that franchise to get them back to where it was. So, for Caitlin, if she comes out this year, she's going to Indiana, a franchise that still has room to get better, but they're in a lot better position. And she has a top tier teammate waiting for her there. So that professional pressure won't be as high as it was on previous generational college superstars who made the pro transition. So that would help. I think also there's a greater, I feel like, just as far as like how less games, which is amazing. That is correct. Like the 3-point revolution has changed so much. And I think when I imagine the folks Erica spoke to about her piece really sort of like made a hint at that too. So just how the game has evolved over time from like the 90s to the 2000s, even as far back as 2016 to now, it's so different. So it's really been exciting to watch that play out in real time. And I think, I think I lost my train of thought for a second. Oh yeah. It's a greater, I think there's greater sort of like understanding of mental health over the years. Like each year there's more understanding, there's more, okay, someone's not in that good space right now, back off, give them that break. You don't need to sort of like be hyper negative if something doesn't go well for them in that particular moment. So I think gradually as a society, as we're getting more and more understanding and better about these kind of things, we know, okay, we need to dial it back a little bit. We don't need to be as vitriolic as we have been. We need to take a time out and be like, okay, that's a person right there. I don't need to be on her back in that regard. I don't need to be as toxic as I have been. I don't need to be like, oh, you messed up my parlay. Like, calm down. Like, relax. Don't do that.
My biggest pet peeves.
Yeah. You ain't. Oh, I bet you to go over 35. Who told you to do that? I didn't. So
that's right. You only got 34. What we doing, fam? Like,
yeah, I won the game. You lost your parlay. I came out better in this exchange. Get off them apps, big dog. Do something else.
Wow. Oh man, Brian was ready. I love that. And I appreciate you also just hammering home the idea that, again, how we talk about mental health is definitely different than it was when Kelsey Plum was going through this, even Kelsey Mitchell. And I would add, we can definitely improve in that area as well. But Misha, I also mentioned this idea of efficiency versus shooters gonna shoot. And I mean, not only are you a former hooper, but you also are an analyst. So I'd love to get your thoughts here before we move on and talk a little bit about this Belgium game and what happened here and break down the roster even a little bit more.
Yeah. So as far as, efficiency's sake, just thinking about this specific game, the Belgium game, right? Sabrina was 2 for 6. Okay. It wasn't like she was putting up 13, 15 shots. Like, folks, she took the shots that she had, because on the USA team, if you don't, then you're going to get thrown by the wayside because you're not doing nothing, right? But in the grand scheme of things, I think the beauty of the New York Liberty right now with her on this team, they have the rebounders for her to take deep shots, right? They have the rebounders to go after that ball. Matter of fact, it's easy for JJ and Breanna Stewart to get those rebounds and find themselves at the free throw line, which helps their efficiency, right? But when we're talking about Caitlin Clark, the team, first of all, the level is different. We're talking college versus pro. But look at her team. What is she surrounded by? A bunch of guards and Hannah Stolke and one more big whose name I'm forgetting right now. Ooh, yeah, okay, maybe they can clean up the boards, but that's not Camila Cardoso. You know what I mean? That's not somebody who has an untapped, like unmatched advantage down low. So as far as Caitlin Clark goes, it just impresses me that much more what she's been able to do, because she does have that pressure of, if I'm not hitting, where else are we getting it from? I also think as of right now, Caitlin Clark is a little bit more in her playmaker bag than I think we saw Sab in last season, because I don't think she had to be as much. Being surrounded by Courtney Vandersloot, having a Breanna Stewart who knows how to go and get hers if she needs to. Where I stand on that issue, it's situational, right? And I think anybody who knows the game of basketball would say the exact same thing. Like, I'm not hard and fast going to say, oh, I hate a player who takes 15, 20 shots a game. You got to shoot to make them. Like, you have to shoot to make them. And there are going to be, law of averages. There's going to be games where you hit all 20 of them. Well, maybe not all 20 of them, 19 out of 20 of them. And there'll be games where you hit 2 out of 20 of them. But if you're that player, if you've established yourself with that role, if your team has the confidence, if your coach has the confidence, I'm not mad at you for playing your role, because in the end, if you don't, you're being selfish.
I like it. See, this is why we have y'all on the show, because I mean, that's expert analysis right there. Just want to remind everyone that you're listening to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media. I'm Erica L. Ayala alongside Misha Jones and Brian Florentin. And this is the time that if y'all have questions for any one of us, all of us, excuse me, type those in the chat now. We are going to talk a little bit about the roster. We kind of hit on this before, but I want to circle back and give y'all time to ask questions about anything that we talked about, anything New York Liberty related. But we talked a little bit about who is and isn't here. Now, Brian, you already talked about how Chelsea Gray, after that injury that had her out in game 4, Vegas was like, we got this. I'm fine. It's fine. So she is still working her way back, not cleared for 5-on-5, which essentially makes her ineligible for a roster to go to Belgium. Probably not a good idea to have one of those spots. That being said, Plum Dog and Jackie Young are the only aces holding it down, because no Asia Wilson.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the MVP is off promoting a new book. I asked her about that. She's very excited, and she was really appreciative of all the kind words she gotten from all the folks that have read it thus far. So having one of your like leading superstars and generational talents on Front Street on these programs, Good Morning America, Stephen Colbert Late Night, having someone who is as good as Asia representing, yes, great cover, excellent cover.
Got my audiobook. Let's go. Let's go.
She was also
Y'all should
mentioned
listen.
like she said I think she mentioned she's a fan of Audible. She said, oh, like, I get to hear my inflection, all that kind of thing. I'm like, oh,
It's so fun. I mean, I just like audiobooks because I'm moving around so much. But man, listen, she come out the gate with some fire. I was
and
like,
also
I know it's called Black Girls, but I was like, the Black girl in me needs some healing too. Aisha. Dang.
I also asked her if she wants to do more writing in the future. So if you see guest op-eds by Asia Wilson, just know your friendly media correspondents help nudge her in that direction. We need we need more writers out here. More writers, more outlets. Why not have an MVP
That's facts.
with a pen? It works.
I love it. I love it. All right, so that makes sense. She's going to be doing a book tour stop in New Orleans and having a conversation with the one and only Cynthia Cooper. And then she finishes out the book tour. I believe it's on February 28th in Coral Springs / Fort Lauderdale / Miami area. And that will be hosted by a friend of the program, Ari Chambers. So check that out. Very cool. Very good stuff. Yeah, she was just in New York at the Barnes & Noble at Union Square, which is a really dope spot, just period. And so I love that for her. So yes, Asia busy with the book tour. We respect that. We love that for her. And again, this is a team that has already qualified. Now, so maybe I'm not worried necessarily about the point guard or the MVP, but what do we think about Benijah Laney Hamilton, Misha, maybe not cracking this roster?
So that's a head scratcher, right? I mentioned earlier there are players who I think are guaranteed locks on this team. I don't think Benijah is one of them right now still, even though she has shown obviously how immensely talented she is. The fact of the matter is it's going to be about who's peaking at the right time, who meshes well. Like, there's a lot of variables in here. Now, do I think it's like an 80-20 chance? Yeah. I give her a good shot at the moment. But it's tough. Making a USA roster is tough anyways. I think because she's not exactly young, but she's not exactly old. You know what I mean? She's kind of in that middle tier. You got to decide between, okay, do you want consistency? Do you want a two-way player like this who you know what you're going to get? Or do you want a younger gun, who may or may not pop off for more points or efficiency and production in other categories? So it's really hard to tell right now. Last time I saw her in a USA jersey, I was happy with what I saw. And based on what we saw today against Belgium, I think it'll be worth having more leadership on the team, as they find themselves in these more precarious and more serious and important situations when the Olympics actually starts. Because that's different, right? We talking about a qualifying tournament right now where they know that they're in and the way that people performed in that situation. It's so different when you're there and you're in it and you haven't experienced, what comes with that. But I have hope for her though. It's just she's not a lock, and that's the sad reality at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. Brian, I want to get your thoughts because, again, I know you were there and just curious if you got any inklings of what Coach Reeve was looking for. But just as a refresher, so you have Ariel Adkins, you have Aaliyah Boston making her debut, you got Nafisa Collier, you have Ka Copper, who I believe this is her first senior tournament. Then you have Ryan Howard, Sabrina Ionescu, Jewel Lloyd, Kelsey Plum, Brianna Stewart, Diana Taurasi, Alyssa Thomas, and Jackie Young. Like, realistically, either if you're talking like for like, like
I'll
who's
circle back to
coming
that
out?
I'll circle back to that.
I mean, like, who's coming out? I mean, I do think there's a spot for Benijah on this roster, but she's gonna have to claw it away from right now. If I had to guess, and I don't know, Ka maybe ? I don't even know. I don't know. AT, like, that's not fair. That's not fair. That's a Sophie's choice if I ever, like, I don't know. But Brian, what you think?
I would say, based off your inflection about one particular name, I'm like, and in watching the game, I'm like, hey, man, like, Team USA defense not hitting right now. Who's on the court? I see. That's why. And then when that person's off the bench, I'm like, oh, look at how dynamic our basketball players are. This is how we do it. So for B, it's going to be tough. And on Friday, Cheryl Reeve did media availability with a lot of like folks across the country, and the name Caitlin came up a couple times as far as if she'd be on the team. And USAB has one more camp, I think it's in April, like right after the Final Four, and I think right before the WNBA draft. And by then, we'll get a feel as to who the 12 will be going into Paris. So that's one more complication to throw in the book. I think Lainey would be great on this team. Like, you have someone who is a captain on defense, someone who makes sure everybody is where they need to be, always talking, making sure everyone is in the right spot, double tough, someone who, if you need a player to really bring that energy, bring that fight, Benaj is your person. So I think there should definitely be a spot for her on this team. I think that even on the other side of the ball on offense, we've seen B operate in the post. We've seen her run offense. We've seen her play that toughness. She can play a full 40 like we saw her do it against the Sun in Uncasville for game 4. So you have someone you can count on in those big time situations. So I think that the committee is going to have a really tough time trying to keep her off, because I think her talent is way too much, and she's definitely deserving of that spot in Paris.
Well, and the other thing here too that I think is important, if I'm sitting on the committee right now, it's a matter of philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. Because I've mentioned a couple of times leadership is extremely important in terms of the Olympic team. DT, obviously, she got all the medals. You know what I mean? She got more medals than anybody else got medals, of course.
And if no one can dethrone her, I mean, you're not losing if you're USAB by having Diana Taurasi. I'm sorry, you're not.
But here's the thing, though, Erica. Here's the thing. I think Breanna Stewart, I think Nafisa Collier, I think, some of these other players who, as far as age goes, are kind of in that same tier with Benaj and Lainey Hamilton and have the full USA team experience. The question, if you're a committee member right now, is what kind of leadership are you okay with taking into the Olympics? Do you need the DT experience that she has? Like, on the court, is it going to be worth it? Or are you okay with leaning on a Breanna Stewart? Are you okay with leaning on those, players who are a little younger but now have that experience? Like, is it time to go ahead and hand them the baton to be the leaders of Team USA? And, if I'm a committee member and that's the way I'm thinking, if I want more youthful energy, I'm good with that. And frankly, if I'm not a committee member just sitting here thinking about it, personally, again, based off what Brian just said, and the difference in the complexion of the game when DT's on the court versus on the bench, I might be ready to take that risk. I'm sorry. I might be ready.
I'm with you. I mean, I personally am with you. Do I think it's going to happen? No. And do I understand it to an extent? If I'm being honest, yes, I do. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you want to double team it or whatever, but having Diana Taurasi wind them legs up to take a last second shot, yeah, I'm going to take that. I'm sorry. Like, I just am. I'm going to be honest. I will take a broke down DT over most healthy players just because the X factor, the lethal ice in the veins, that doesn't seem to wear and tear like her back does. So, I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm good either way. I'm not advocating for or against DT.
I'm advocating. I'm sorry.
I'm here. Sorry. I hear it. And I'm not mad. I'm genuinely not mad. This is just a situation where some people, whether you like it or not, they get to ride off into the sunset. And DT's one of those people. I don't know that USAB wants that smoke. And I honestly don't know that there would be, which is also wild. I think that they're hedging bets maybe a little bit too much, because I think people would understand. And I mean, I could see DT on this team. Now, defense is my thing. Like I said, I didn't watch the whole game, so I can't speak to that at this particular game. But I've been on record saying DT, as much as I love defense, it's wild that I would still make room for DT. That's saying a lot, because I love defense. And I don't think
I love offense. So we didn't fully switch sides of the fence on this one.
I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. But Lainey Hamilton and Alyssa Thomas, I think they can give you similar skill sets. I think a lot of people on paper would say that. I do think they're very different in their approach. I think the results are very similar. I think, again, that's why on paper people might say that. For me, I mean, because I understand AT's leadership. I ain't never had a problem with AT's leadership. So I'm not going to necessarily knock her. If I interpret what the USAB way is, do I think Lainey fits that a little bit better? Yes. The new wave that Dawn Staley brought to USAB, I think she fits that for sure. Because USAB wasn't messing with Lainey or Ka or Atkins or Jackie Young a few years ago. That's a whole nother conversation to be had. I mean, that's a whole, like, we need to write a book on that, okay? And I mean, if you ask Teresa Edwards, that goes back to Tara Vanderveer, but you know, I ran out of tea for today, so we're gonna have to hit that on another podcast.
Your mug empty.
Is empty, y'all. Is empty, which means we about to wrap up here. But I like this. I think it's an interesting comment. If Lainey Hamilton don't make it, might be a blessing in disguise. I'm not worried about this roster. I think if I'll put it this way, if she can't seem to crack that April roster, or the roster this year going into the Olympics, I think it's going to be really tough for her to catch the wave. I think she might miss her window. And that is unfortunate to me. And I wonder how much USAB even looks into that and at all, because I do think you miss when you don't have someone like Betnijah Laney that gets to represent the United States. I do. I mean, that's how a lot of people feel about NECA as well. So, I mean, again, whole nother podcast. Speaking of, why do you think NECA didn't sign with the Liberty after she was in town for the boy Sun versus Nets game? I was like, the Connecticut Sun had a game. Ain't nobody tell me. I ain't getting
Boy Sun is hilarious.
That's spectacular.
The boy Sun.
Oh, the boy was sons, plural, because it was only the one son. So I got confused. I got confusion. I'm still gonna get off these jokes, even with the congestion haze. With Lainey and Stewart sitting courtside, we kind of mentioned this at the top, but I think really it wasn't the right fit at the right time. I think, and someone said it in the chat. You know, she's the president of the WNBPA, has gone on the record saying she would like to be commissioner one day, which I loved in Shattered Glass. And you're gonna give NECA an interview. You're gonna bring her out and show her a good time. It's NECA Ogumike. Absolutely. Do I think the Liberty would have tried to make something work if she absolutely wanted to come here? Yeah. Do I think they would have been jumping over hurdles and pulling out chairs? I do. I think it would be a very different New York Liberty squad. And that's another thing too. You have to see how much do you really want to tinker with something to a team that in a lot of ways felt like they progressed pretty well early on. I also was like LOL earlier. I forget if it was Misha or Brian talking about effectively how Cheryl Reeve in the Belgium game, it became evident. And with this tournament, that what she's trying to do is get the reserve players, that rotation, those responsibilities airtight, because it was the opposite of what I think we saw from the New York Liberty. And Sandy opted to really get her starters on board. So it will always be a sore point. Shoulda, coulda, woulda with Sandy and the New York Liberty, and I think she made the right choice. Just ran out of runway on that, but I wanted to make sure to mention that. Go ahead, Brian.
I would also add to the question about why she didn't sign after going to the game. If your friends are treating you to free courtside seats and meals, would you say no? I would not, personally. I may not go there to work, but if you're going to take me out for a night on the town, I get to hang out. I get to sit across Robin Roberts. This good time. A good time was had by all. Sign me up.
I'm with that. And I know we talked about it earlier. Again, maybe it doesn't work for this year, but what does this team look like in another few years? And is NECA going to remember, what her experience was? I mean, how did the Dodgers win the Ohtani sweepstakes? They had Kobe Bryant record a video about how Shohei should be a member of the LA Dodgers. Now, there is a part of me that feels a little bit uncomfortable with that, just obviously because Kobe Bryant is no longer here, but it's the foresight for me. And these are the things I feel like we talked about this last time, Misha, right? Like, these are the things that players appreciate because they haven't gotten them. But the more it happens, the more now it's going to be expected in the norm.
Yeah, the way you're gonna compete in free agency and to get big names is doing the most, just like that. And if you can't compete, if you're in a market where that's, not quite as possible or not quite as impactful, then hey, you're gonna have to make it up in other ways. So, but yeah, agreed.
I think it's very, very interesting. All right, let's go around the horn real quick. We're going to wrap up this show. But Misha, let the folks know what you got going on. Any final thoughts about USAB or free agency?
My final thought, don't believe everything you hear unless it's been confirmed. And everybody breathe. Everybody take a deep breath. This is not the tabloids. This is not E. This is not none of that. This is
extra
free agency. extra. I hear that in my nightmares. But yeah, and I think it ties into the point that we were making earlier about Sabrina Ionescu and Kelsey Plum and Caitlin Clark and just the pressure that comes with all this, folks. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to keep track of what happens in a league that we love, right? And watching a sport and watching people play a game that we love. Don't blow it out of proportion. We ain't gotta be fighting a big. We can disagree. We can do all that, but be civilized. Remember,
extra.
This is cute, right? There are real world issues still happening to this day. Look, all right. So everything, take it with a grain of salt. If you feel a little too overstimulated, go touch some grass. I don't know what to tell you.
On that note, anything else you got coming up? When can we hear you on Flow Hoops?
I'm actually on a little break until February 23rd and 25th. We're back on Flow Hoops at 7 p.m. on the 23rd and then 1 p.m. on the 25th. As of right now, though, Your Mama's Kitchen, a Higher Ground podcast, is currently streaming. If you haven't listened to that at all, it's with Michelle Norris, world-renowned journalist, wonderful, strong Black woman. I love listening to her talk about anything. So if you're interested in that, Your Mama's Kitchen on Apple Podcasts, anywhere else that you get your podcasts.
Let's go. All right, Brian, your turn. Any thoughts about either free agency, USAB, and let folks know what you got cooking?
One last free agency thought. Speaking to the point Misha was making, this offseason really shows that you really need to have a lot of solid foundation if you want to attract the best players. You've got to, as ownership groups, you have to make sure that you stick. You say what you say you're gonna do something. You deliver it as best you can. You make sure that you have first-class facilities. You make sure the amenities are solid. You make sure that the organization is really rock solid and first class in a lot of ways. KP was mentioning to me as well too. Mark Davis in Las Vegas. Here in New York, we have that. The folks in Seattle, great ownership. The likely incoming ownership group in Golden State, big money coming in. Minnesota, good ownership, first class facilities. Like, you have to make sure that you deliver and make the environment as comfortable and productive as possible, so people want to go there and stay there. Most importantly, when we think back to 2022 and we see how that team in Chicago just dissolved over time, a lot of the foundational things that weren't there, as far as like facilities, player treatment, medical support, all of those things haven't been there compared to other teams. And now they are in a moment of reflection where they have to do a total rebuild and figure out what went wrong, how can we fix it, and how can we sort of get back to the top of contention. So I think for other teams, you got to make sure that you do everything you can to give your players the support that they need so they can be their best selves when they play for you. And as far as like work stuff, I got a couple of things coming up. I'm gonna try to do a story on Sabrina if I can. She has that big shooting competition in about like a week or two, so that's gonna be a fun time. So I'll try to have something on that, and just some general things leading up to the season. Always make sure that we keep the ball moving.
I love it. She's gonna defend her title once and for all here. I love it.
We should have talked about that. I want to know what y'all think about that.
Hey, I mean, listen, I have a lot of thoughts, but let's talk about it on our next live stream because we'll be on the other side of that, and hopefully I will be on the other side of this head cold. You feel me? But yeah, definitely gonna be keeping eyes out on Indiana. And speaking of what I'm working on, seems like there's gonna be some fun activations and overlaps that have not yet been announced regarding women's basketball as a whole. So I'm super excited about that. With CBS Sports HQ, which is a 24/7 streaming digital sports media channel, I'm going to be doing a lot of hits this Sunday, just about 2 to 5 minute segments talking more about Caitlin Clark and putting into context where she stands all time. We talked about that a little bit, and we'll have some good stuff coming up and more stuff regarding Black Rosie Media, of course, covering USAB and women's hockey. But I'm gonna get back into my little comfy little nook on the couch. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I'm here alongside Brian Florentin and Misha Jones. I am Erica L. Ayala, and you have been listening to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media. That's right. Curry versus Ionescu. Thumbs up for Curry. All right, well, let's see what happens. I think it's gonna be a good one. I definitely have a lot of thoughts. And I mean, is this gonna be like Billie Jean King vibes? I think we gotta put it into context, and we can talk about that on the other side because I definitely have thoughts. I think it's interesting, but I definitely have thoughts. All right, y'all. Be well. I'm gonna try and get well, and we'll catch you on the next stream. Peace out, everybody.